Hey everyone, welcome back to part 2 of Unit 5, Lab 3, page 3, Importing and Accessing Data. If you're just joining us, make sure to watch the first video, part 1, where I went over data processing and making sure we got a data set to work with, and we built a bunch of selectors already. So we went through all of these, and we're up to number 9. So in number 9, we're going to build a function that can report back all of the items in a specific column in our data table. So let me just open up the data table a little bit so you could all see what I'm talking about here. So if, for example, I wanted to, get all of the values in the first column, in column A or 1, if I just wanted the titles, right now I don't have a way of doing that. So far I've only created a way to access the data in the table and to access a specific record, so access a specific row, and or like one specific field, so one of the cells in that record. But I don't have a way of getting all of the items in the column. So that's what we're going to create today. I guess I'm going to do it the way that it comes to me a little bit more like naturally, I guess. And what I'm thinking is I'm going to go through every record. So I'm going to create a block. And I'm going to call it the column blank of table, just as it says right there in the instructions. And I'm going to create a block, and I'm going to make sure that I'm going to go through every item in this data table, and I'll just grab that field. So whatever it is, like from the record, I'll grab like field 3, but I'm going to go through each item in the entire data table and store that, and then report that back as a list. So to do that, let me start off by making the block. We're going to name it. Well, first we're going to pick that it's a list block, and it's going to be a reporter. It's going to be a function. So we're going to call this column, and I'm going to use the parameter column number. So I'm being very verbose in my parameters here, just so anyone reading my code can understand what's going on here. So the column of table. And then let's see, we're going to just call it the data set. So that parameter is going to be created by having a percentage sign in front of the name. So when I hit OK, we're going to see our block editor come up. And now in here, this is where we're going to write the function. We're going to actually create it. But first, I want to make sure that Snap knows that data set is going to be of type list. So it's going to expect the entire list. And column number, I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to give it a type of number. That way someone that's using this can't type in a letter, for example. Okay, so I'm going to hit apply, and as I mentioned, what I want to do is I want to basically create like a temporary storage container, so a variable, and that's going to be a script variable. So we're going to go over here, drag in a script variable, and we're going to call this the list that we're going to return. So this is going to be the the entire column. I'm just going to name it entire column because I think that's a decent name. And so what I'm going to do is I'm now going to go through every single record here, every single line, every single row, and I'll just grab the item, the field item, from that row in each one of them. So I can use a for each block underneath my script variables, and each item in the data set, let me think about that actually. For each item in data set, so each item would be the entire row, and so I want to make sure that I grab just the specific field that I'm looking for, the correct field. So since I already created that, let me go down here to the bottom, and I'm going to drag in this block, the field of record. So the record is going to be the item, and the field is going to be the column number that I want to grab from each of the records. And now all I have to do is I have to make sure that I add it to my variable here. So I'm going to add this thing. I'm going to add this to my entire column list variable. And then at the end of this, once all of these items, we've gone through all of them, we can just return back the entire column. So let's test this out, and then we'll see if we have any bugs or anything that we have to fix. So I'm going to hit apply. I'm going to leave it open actually also, but once I hit apply, it should be here at the bottom of my of my list blocks. So there we go. I grabbed it, column of table. So for table, we're going to bring in the entire video games. Actually, no, we don't want to use all of the video games. What we want to do is we want to make sure we just grab the data from the video games. So I'm going to use my other block that I created. I'm going to throw that in there because we don't need the title, like, you know, the heading. We just need all of the items in that column except for the heading. So I'm going to use that block. Let me just move this over a little bit. And let's say I want to grab column 1. So if I click on this, hopefully, ideally, it would go through and grab the first item, the first field of every single record and go down the list, all the way down to the bottom, and then report back all of that as a list. So let's see if that happens. Let's click on it and see what happens. So it says expecting list but getting number. So what's probably happening is that it's expecting to return a list, but it's not returning a list. So the problem might be in my script variable, my entire column. Right now, when I declared this variable, I didn't actually initialize it to anything. So Snap doesn't know that this variable should be a variable that holds a list. So right now, it might be setting the number or like an item inside of the variable, but then just replacing it every single time. I don't really know what's going on behind the scenes, but I think my issue is that I didn't initialize it in the beginning. So let's do that. Let's initialize it by setting it. So we can set this variable right underneath the declaration. We can set entire column equal to an empty list. And that way we can add items to that list. Okay, so to add an empty list, we can grab this list block, drag it here. And right now this actually isn't an empty list. This is a list with one empty item, but it has like an item. So to remove that, I just hit this little left caret or left arrow. And now we've declared entire column, that variable, to be a list variable. So now it can hold list items. And I think if everything's correct, if my thinking and my logic is correct, we should be able to go through the entire column or the entire list, the entire data set, the data set that's passed in, which right now is the data of video games. And for each item, so for each record, I should be able to, actually, let me think about that. Yes, because each item will be the record. And I should be able to go to the specific column, specific field that I'm looking for in that record, in that record, and add that to the entire column, this brand new variable that I've created temporarily. And then once I'm done, once I go through each item, then I can report back the entire column. So I'm going to hit apply, and we're going to retest it by clicking on this block and hopefully getting all of the titles. And I clicked on it, and it's doing some work here. So I mean, already it's taking a bit longer than I expected. So I probably did something wrong, or maybe I'm not thinking about it correctly. So we'll fix it if we see an issue. But let's see if it returns anything at all. I mean, it really shouldn't be. Actually, I was going to say it shouldn't be taking this long, but it looks like it worked actually. So that looks like it's correct, but it's probably not efficient. Maybe I'm doing something wrong there. Let me think. So honestly, at this point, I'm pretty happy that it just worked. I want to test it out with another column though. Let me see what's available in this in the data set here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it looks like the 6th column is the genre of the game. So let's just test it out. Let me close out the block editor because it seems to be working. And I'm going to just type in 6 as my column. And when I run it, hopefully we get all of the genres for all of the video games going down the list. But as you can see, it is taking a long time. So, and the computer that I'm using is actually pretty fast. So I might be doing this incorrectly. Maybe I'm not using blocks that I should be, or maybe there's a more efficient way of doing this. So there we go. We see that it does work. My thinking is correct, but it might not be as efficient as it could be. So there might be another way to do this. Let's see what it says in the instructions. Record and columns are selectors for whatever. Yes, we've already created those things. Try to figure out how to report just one column, but click if you really need a hint. Let's see, we don't need a constructor for this abstract data type because we are importing the data from the internet. Okay. All right, so I mean, this is just telling us that when we created the blocks, you see how it says like, record, field number of record, and then like the input has record there. So I guess you could double check and make sure that you're importing it or using the block correctly. But I'm trying to think that there probably is a better way. Maybe we could use one of these other higher order functions. Part of me feels like we could use something like keep, but keep is using a conditional there. So we would be testing if something is true in every item, and that's not really what we would want. But map might work. Map might work because map will allow us to run a function over an entire data set and return back a list, I believe. So if I right click on it and hit help, it says it computes a function of each list item. So I just have to make sure that every list item is a every list item is the record that I'm looking for for the entire data set. Okay, so maybe if I combine some of the blocks that I've already created with this map function, we could recreate the same functionality for this block that I just created that gives us the entire column. All right, but no promises. If you just needed to get it working, this seems to work. And you know what? I have a feeling that I did something wrong because I don't think it should be taking as long to go through this. So maybe I'm doing something wrong there. Or maybe I'm like going through every single field in the data set and instead of just like going directly to the thing that I need. I'll have to think about it more, but I'm going to do that like not on camera, not on a video. For now, let's just see if we can use this map block because I think that'll make it a little bit easier, or maybe it'll run faster. And maybe we could use that computation block from Unit 5 Lab 1, computation time, and actually time it to see like how efficient our strategy is here. So what I would want to do is for the function, I'd want to go through each item of the data. So over the data table, so I could do that. And I would want the function that I would want to run on here is to grab the specific field in a record. So how would I do that? So let me think. So for each item, each item in this data table will be a record actually, because I believe if I just grab this, each item. Oops, let me just click on that so I could see it. Each item is the entire record, and when I want to run, the only function I want to run is the field number. So I can put that back in the map block, and then I just want to grab the field block, map this over the data of the data table. Okay, so you could leave this blank. You could leave this record block or space right there blank, because what it'll do is it's going to go through every single item in the table, which is a record, and stick it right in here. So you can leave it blank, or you can be a little bit more explicit and just say that, this is going to be the game. I can name it whatever I want. I'm just going to name it game and just to fill it in so that it's not empty. And then for field 1, we should be able to return a list that has all of the first fields, which is the first column in this data set. So I'm going to click on this and, fingers crossed, hopefully it'll work. I clicked on it and it immediately spit back all of the items in this column. So that seems to work. Let me test out column 6 and see if that also runs correctly. So field 6. And it just spits back all of the items. So already you could see this is so much faster. This higher order function map is a lot faster. So I can actually fix my code here. So let me go back to my column block, and I could just, get rid of all of this. Let me just get rid of all of that. And I'm just going to report back this map. And all I would need to do now is is make sure that I grab the column number and stick that in there, because I was hard coding it. I was putting in field 1 or field 6, so I would get that column. And let me just see what else I would have to fix. So when I pass in the data set, I could do the data of not of video games, but of the data set. So I can do something like that. And I think that should work. So now when I actually use this block, I put in the entire data set. I don't have to put in the data of table video games, for example. All right, so let me hit apply. Let's test it out. So now I can just throw in the data set directly, unlike here, where I actually had to throw in the entire record of table inside of this record block, this field block. But now this should work. So column 6 gives us the genre. Column 1 gives us the items. Column 2 is just going to be like true or false. There we go, bunch of trues. Maybe all of these games. I actually don't remember what column 2 is, but I just see that there has a bunch of trues there. The third one, maybe it's how many players. So let's do column 3 and report that back. And we see that a lot of these games are single player games, but it's much faster and it's much more efficient than it was before. So I'm quite happy, quite content, and I hope that helped you out a little bit. But for number 10, you would basically come up with your own question with the data set that you're looking at, and build code to answer that question. So if you're using the video game question or the video game data set, you would come up with a question for that. So let's see. And it looks like you should use map, keep, or combine, those higher order functions. From what you've already learned, you could click on that and go back to the old labs that you've done to learn about those higher order functions. And then there's some stuff here about challenges in collecting data and cleaning that data. So, fixing things that might be wrong in the data, or removing things that you don't need, stuff like that. So I would recommend you check that out. And I hope this video was helpful. And I hope you saw part 1 also. So if you have no idea what I just did, just go back to part 1 and go through it slowly, because I think I explained it pretty decently in that section. So I will catch you in the next video. If you have any suggestions or any requests for BJC videos that you'd like to see, please post them in the comments below. If this video was helpful, hit like. And if you want to see more like these, hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time.